All right. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for coming to the this briefing today on the new Illinois tax reform plan, which I was pleased to be able to introduce. We've got the final bills introduced today. The genesis of the plan was the Federal Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. And one of the issues that I had seen in the various state legislative responses to the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act is that they were coming from folks who were very much opposed to the new federal tax reform, to those tax cuts. And as well, they seemed like there were more excuses to do more state and local spending instead of actually getting more relief for taxpayers. So what we've done is put together a package of 3 bills. The primary bill is one that expands our Invest in Kids tax credit. That credit model is a model that has been upheld repeatedly in the tax courts. It's been upheld by the IRS and is being used in states across the country. I know there are alternate plans where the government would set up a foundation within the government itself. I would respectfully contend, and I've had several other tax law professors that have been writing on this topic, that is not going to survive IRS scrutiny, or certainly is very problematic in terms of IRS scrutiny. And we've got some very distinguished professors who have cast real doubt on those efforts. And so what I would respectfully contend is we think we've built a better mousetrap here. If you use the educational tax credit model, it looks like that is going to be the best way to allow Illinoisans to obtain relief for their excess state and local income taxes above $10,000. But again, I wanted to come here as someone who is a known taxpayer advocate who has sought taxpayer relief from property taxes, relief from income tax burdens, and come at it from that perspective of, hey, let's do those things. But while we're doing them, or while we're waiting for them to be allowed to be voted on in the House, let's get some immediate relief for our Illinoisans who are suffering under these great tax burdens. The next bill in the package expands our 529 program, Bright Start. So here, come on in, Keith. Also, Representative Keith Wheeler is here this morning. I know some of our other representatives were delayed in the weather today. So the second bill in the package is conforming our 529 plan to allow for the new flexibility in the federal plans for use of those funds in K through 12 education and for disabled services. Right now, if we don't make this change, we're going to put Illinois parents in the perverse position of having to transfer their Illinois 529 funds to out-of-state plans that allow the use of those funds for K through 12 education and then use them to spend on K through 12 education in Illinois. It's a much better policy and just a simpler, easier policy to just change our Illinois plan to allow those parents maximum flexibility. The third bill in the package is to help small business directly. As many of you know, the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act will help small businesses, and it encourages small business development and growth. So the third bill would change the way that our unemployment insurance applies to those solo businesses, those very small businesses. Right now, even though you're the employee owner of the business and you can't very well fire yourself, you have to pay into the unemployment insurance system and be covered by that, again, when you really have no way to reap the benefits of that coverage. The bill that we've introduced today would allow for once you hire an employee, hey, then the protection is fully there. But just when you're getting started or you're a solo business, there's no reason to be imposing a requirement on you to be part of an insurance package that you literally can't take advantage of. So again, I want to let Representative Wheeler make some comments, and then we will stand for more additional questions on the package related items.
Thank you, Peter. Let me first say thank you to Representative Breen and some other members of our caucus who are stepping up to try and lead on an issue that's actually kind of tough right now. We've got a unique situation in Illinois, and it appears from my taxpayers in my district that are already being penalized pretty heavily by paying such high property taxes that now they're going to get hit again. So while we work toward reform in Springfield, which is a struggle in my 3 years of being here, we have to do something to protect the taxpayers that we're representing right now. So I appreciate the leadership again of Peter Breen and others in our caucus that are working toward doing this. And happy to do questions next, Peter.
Okay, sure. we have any questions on the package and
On the first element you mentioned, helping with alleviating from the SALT caps, can you delve into that a bit more? What does this look like? And you have number one up there talking about public education tax credits.
Sure. And I have to tell you, I've when I brought this idea to some of our more conservative think tank folks, they immediately got a sour look on their faces because it strikes against the idea that we need to be lowering our tax burden, at least on its face. But what we're really trying to do is bring over $1 billion back into Illinois. We estimate that the amount of credits that would be needed is somewhere in the $6 to $8 billion range. If you multiply that by the tax rate of 22% in the new brackets, just that amount, you're talking about $1.25 billion back in the pockets of Illinoisans, out of the hands of federal bureaucrats. They can use that money here locally. Everyone has been talking about growing Illinois. The way to do that is to bring more investment and more money back in. So what we're doing is we're using that Invest in Kids model, which is where the Department of Revenue, they implement the program. Right now, you give to a scholarship granting organization, which would give a scholarship to a child to go to private school. What we're saying is, hey, give to a foundation that will support a public school district. We'll get you 100% credit back, so everything stays even and level as it is today. But again, it's a great expansion of the program. And it is a workaround to some extent. I mean, you wouldn't design this program necessarily in a vacuum, but in the current context, that's the way we've structured it. Here's the thing. States across the country, red states and blue states, agree that education tax credits can be given, and you can get a full deduction on your charitable side for those contributions. So really, when you look at tax court decisions that uphold this, you look at the tax law professors have been split on the various proposals, but the one proposal that they say, hey, is the safest, it's the one that's got the best chance of succeeding. It's this sort of proposal where you use the existing educational tax credit structure to bring forward tax credits to your local folks, as well as a practical matter. So we're politicians. If you've got scholarship tax credits are probably the leading form of educational school choice for many states in the country. So with that being the case, I don't see the IRS shutting that down. I don't see Congress shutting it down when it's such a popular program in so many states across the country, again, red states and blue states. So that's why this model is the best place to go. But I do want to say, we're here offering a hand of compromise and friendship to the Democrats. We're all about protecting taxpayers. And if they want to join us on this, which it looks like, they've got their own proposal, which is a little more simple, which just has you change the memo line on your check for instead of saying tax payment, you say charitable contribution, or instead of saying State of Illinois, it says State of Illinois Excellence Fund. I don't think that's going to survive legal scrutiny at the IRS, but certainly this structure gives you more certainty for the people of Illinois, gives you a greater ability to say, hey, this is something that is going to be much more legally sound from a tax perspective.
So just so I better understand, you essentially want to increase or expand the Invest in Kids Act to allow for taxpayers to donate to a public school and get 100% tax credit for that?
So public school foundation. And in fact, there are already 65 public school foundations across the state, including CPS and many of our other districts. So that would be the model. It would be just that. And when you look at our program is much smaller currently. We have a $100 million gift, $75 million credit. In the state of Florida, their scholarship granting organization program is $600 million. So if you look at that, scaling it from that, it's about 10 times the size of that. So it's a good-sized program. But because we already have the structure set up, we're really just growing that program. We're expanding that program as it exists today.
And that would be deductible for state taxes and federal taxes?
So you're going to get a credit against your state income and property taxes. And then on the federal side, you can write that off because you've given a check to a 501c3 charitable contribution. I'll tell you, too, one of the issues, there's an IRS regulation that says you have to deduct any benefit you get back from the entity you give a charitable contribution to. Well, when you give a charitable contribution to a 501c3, you're not getting any benefit back from them. You get a benefit back from the state government. And as complex as that may sound, that's the current model of scholarship granting organizations across the country. And that is the model that comports with IRS regs. But however, if you give the money to the government and they give you a direct benefit back, you're certainly gonna run into more trouble, or at least it's not as safe as this method.
Representative, with regards to point two, Treasurer Frericks has spoken at length against allowing families to use Bright Start plans to fund K through 12 education, basically saying it could potentially blow a hole in our income tax revenue, as well as allow for mostly wealthy families paying private tuition to not pay. What would you say to people who would make that argument?
Well, I think that's silly. If there is any impact on the state treasury, it's minimal. If we don't make these changes, Treasurer Frericks' Bright Start program is going to dwindle pretty significantly. Parents are going to go where they can get their flexibility. It's my understanding Missouri's 529 plan, which Illinoisans can invest in, you could just go get in a Missouri 529 plan, and then you could spend it on Illinois schooling. Again, why would you stop Illinois parents from using their own money for however they see fit?
But they would get a income tax deduction on whatever they put into the Bright Start plan.
So there's a deduction from your income, but that's not a credit. So there's a very small amount of money. You're talking 4.95% off of that amount. Even if you had $1 billion, and I haven't run any of the numbers on this. Even if you had $1 billion of new money going into 529 plans, that's $50 million in a loss to the state treasury. We spend more than that in a bad day here in Springfield. In a slow day here in the General Assembly, we spend more money than that. So really, I mean, this is wonderful relief for Illinois parents at minimal expense, if any, to the state.
Representative, you said a few minutes ago that the federal act was basically an incentive for local and state governments to spend more. That's what you said?
Well,
And what do you mean by that?
Well, when I see my friends who are more on the hard left on the Democratic side, they want to give local and state governments more ability to spend. They think that this cap on the state and local tax deduction will force states and localities to reduce their spending. And I don't think that's the case. I mean, unfortunately, having been in the political realm long enough, I think they're going to keep spending until we stop them from the political side. But again, we're coming at it from the taxpayer protection side, saying, hey, both Representative Wheeler and I and most of the members of our caucus have been in favor of property tax relief. We're in favor of income tax relief. And this is yet another means of giving some relief to Illinoisans. I'd say, too, I represent Lombard. It's a modest community in DuPage County. And I'm estimating that at least a third of my households are going to be subject to this $10,000 cap. A third of them in Lombard. And I know many other communities are just getting hit. And these are middle-income folks whose property taxes are so high that they start getting up near this cap. And then with the newly increased income tax, they then are getting over the cap. And I know, too, I'd like to have Representative Wheeler talk about some of the property tax impacts in his district, just on that front.
Yeah, I mean, so the district I represent is the 50th district, which is about 2/3 of it is in Kane County, a third of it's in Kendall County. At least the last study I saw that had a rating of the highest counties as far as, property taxes and as a percentage of home value. Kane County was number 7, Kendall County, my home county, number 1. So it's a huge impact. And if you look at those families that are getting going, they've invested in our community, they're paying those high property taxes, now they're getting hit with 3% increase in their in-state income tax, and the SALT deduction, you're looking at it pressed right up against the edge there or going right over it. So again, this is about a property tax payer perspective, not just about how government runs and how we do with the federal government at the moment, but these are real families. And in my district, I know I've talked to several of them who are struggling with the fact that even if they wanted to move, they couldn't move because their taxes are so high, it's depressed the value of their home, they can't get out what they already owe. So this is a very convoluted system that we are trying to address. But at the same time, we have to look at it from the property taxpayer's perspective, and that's what this is really all about. And I'll just reiterate what Peter said earlier. We are willing to work with anybody who wants to get this accomplished. This is not we have the only plan that works or the best plan in the world. We're happy to negotiate, happy to discuss this. And I look forward to those conversations taking place, and we'll go from there.
You meant number 1 in the country, right?
Yeah, well, I tell you what, it depends. There's all different rankings, but I know that for the way it shakes out in my area, it seems like the smaller homes in Kendall County, the ones you'd finally, you might see a single mom raising a small family. As a percentage of home values, those are in that 3, 4, and 5% range, and some higher than that. And it just seems to be that we've got to find a better balance here. I know we're going to work I know our caucus has worked avidly toward that over the 3 years that I've been here. But in the meantime, until we actually get something done with that, we have to do something else in the meantime to protect these taxpayers. Excuse me.
Representative, we've seen similar types of proposals, speaking to point number 1 you've got up there, that would allow for, people to just donate straight to any government entity and have that written off. And the criticism is, well, that's not addressing overspending of these local governments, of these school districts. What's your reaction to that criticism? People who say, you know what, my local school district has administrators making 6 figures and their pensions and everything. Is this just a way to kind of deflect for a little bit until the reform bug hits everybody else?
We'll come back for the press conference on my educational administrative cost limitation bill, which is still in drafting. But look, here's the problem. We're in Illinois. What you've got in front of you are representatives who have stood for property tax relief and income tax relief, and we will continue to stand for it and fight for it. But we are also facing a situation where Illinois is competing against our neighboring states and other states in the South and Southwest that are taking our residents. And this is a self-defense measure, if nothing else. We don't want folks going over to Indiana because finally this is the straw that breaks the camel's back. I mean, we're seeing that every day. Particularly in my district, I am losing people like crazy. It was one thing, they said, oh, well, folks were fleeing Chicago and maybe the tougher parts of Chicago. People are fleeing DuPage County now. So we are in an emergency situation. So anything we can do to protect taxpayers, that we should be doing. And I would say to those other proposals about giving to the government, again, it's almost like change the memo line of the check from tax payment to charitable contribution. It seems like it's a little too much sleight of hand. Professor Eric Rasmussen of Indiana University School of Business has criticized it. Andy Grewal of the University of Iowa College of Law. The Tax Foundation has criticized directly those particular measures. Hey, if the IRS blesses those measures, then so be it. But right now, my understanding was the last statement that Secretary Mnuchin made about this was that he was going to authorize higher audits in blue states that try these mechanisms. So I think we've got to do the most legally sound thing we can. Again, this bill it's our starting point. It's our recommended starting point. We think we've built a better mousetrap, but we are here ready to negotiate on behalf of the people. And so anything we can do to protect Illinois taxpayers, we need to do. I want to address that one quick question about you mentioned something about losing money for private schools. Let's remember that parents that pay the full cost of private school education for their kids are taking a huge burden, an over $10,000 burden in most parts of the state, off of property taxpayers. So giving them back a little something is certainly not, that shouldn't be something that we are that much concerned about when the amounts of money are so small. So, yeah. More questions?
Representative, as a supporter of Representative Ives, what are your thoughts on her controversial ad?
Well, I don't like the ad. The points made could and should be made in a much less incendiary way.
Should she take it down?
Let me say this. When I saw that ad, it reminded me of the ad in the governor's race in Virginia, where they had the pickup truck with the Gillespie bumper sticker running down children who were, I believe, children who were immigrants to the country. And it struck me the point of the ad was not even to pay for a run of the ad. It was to get the media to pick it up, put it on the evening news, and show the ad repeatedly. So I looked in Politico yesterday, and I think they said that it was $5,000 was put behind the ad. So essentially, the ad was never even put up on the air. They shouldn't run the ad. It's not an ad that really helps to advance the conversation.
I wanted to ask about the state budget and the budget addresses coming up. $30, $40 billion. How much money should the state be spending?
We should spend within our means, number one, like every family in Illinois has to. And at that point, then we begin the conversation. I agree with those who believe that we ought to look at, I think let me say this, our easier place to start is on property tax relief. Then we have to get to the income tax relief. We need to have an honest conversation about this. We have very few honest conversations in Springfield. And that, the issue of taxes and the fact that tax burdens are driving people out of the state is something you will not see acknowledged on the other side of the aisle. When we go to the House floor, they will just never acknowledge that the regulations, the taxes are driving people and businesses out of the state. If we can do that, we can have that honest conversation, I think we can move forward.
So
Do you have some comments,
go ahead.
Keith?
Let me jump into a question. I'm going to follow a theme that I've used many times on the House floor, and I think we should start the budget process with actually the revenue estimate that's outlined by the Constitution and state law already. Now, if you look and see, the Senate actually took that up in their budget process and passed a revenue estimate. In the House, we just dropped it, which means that we have never actually followed the budget process any single year since Peter and I have been in office. And I think that reflects very much in how we actually run this entire government as a state. We take the things that are convenient and do those, but then we skip the things that make it harder. If we actually were to follow the budget process that's outlined, start with the revenue estimate, then take all your above-the-line expenses, take them out of the equation, divide it among the different appropriations committees, and actually have a discussion within those committees. That hasn't happened since I've been here. In my 3 years in general services, I've discussed one line item for one department. That's it. The rest of it's just been taking testimony. We should actually have a real honest budget discussion, both sides.
Maybe we only need $20 billion worth of government.